Test check, test check. Seems good there. Jesse's here. Good to see you, Jesse. Dropping the Luther. We're going to give everyone a little bit of time. We just fired up. Give everyone a little bit of time, and then we will get going. Who else do we have? Leland is here. Hello, Leland. Welcome. Welcome to First Baptist Church of Leadville, guys. We're going to just give a little bit more time. Let everyone roll in. But not too much more. Not too much more. Liam is here. Hi, Tanner. How's your day going? It's going great, Liam. Thanks for asking. Yeah. Welcome. Tabitha's here. Welcome, Tabitha. Good to see you. And Shirley is here. Good to be here. Good to have you, Shirley. Welcome, welcome. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and start getting going. Apologetics lesson 17. And we've just been trucking. Going all through apologetics. Shirley says, glad to have my internet back up and working. That is awesome. That is awesome. Jean Leglin, 999, has donated $10. I'm going to be honest, I'm not exactly sure how you do that on Twitch when we're not affiliate or anything like that, but thank you, Gene. Appreciate that. Welcome. Thanks for being here. If indeed you have donated, I don't know how it all works. If indeed you have donated, then thank you so much. We do appreciate it. But welcome. I hope you enjoy your time here. Rafe is here, to the glory of God. Welcome, Rafe. Donna Custer says, the Custers are here and making sure the chat is working for us. Indeed, it works. Indeed, it works. I know how disappointed Charlie can be when the chat isn't working, so you will be pleased to know it is working. We can see your comments. Gene Leglin donates $100, $200 from Leland Gaming. Look at that, man. This is incredible. Donation just rolling in. Jesse says Ollie is mesmerized by you on the screen. That's pretty funny. Welcome, guys. Okay, let's get rolling. Now, as always, our path forward on this study has been using Timothy Keller's book, Making Sense of God. Okay? That's been our path forward. That's been the structure that we're using, Making Sense of God. I think it's a wonderful book. Timothy Keller's one of the best on culture and apologetics. So if you are curious on culture, apologetics, anything like that, Timothy Keller's the way to go. Fantastic. Man, Gene Leglin just dropping the donations, $280. It's amazing. It's amazing. The D Fields are here. Good to see you guys. Good to see you. Now, we were last time on question 8, the problem of morals. Okay? The problem of morals, question 8. Now, what we did last time is we did a critique of unbelieving perspectives on morality. Gene Leglin says it's a joke. Sorry, bro. No, after you did it a couple more times, I realized it was a joke. I thought it was funny. Thank you, Gene Leglin. Take care. Thanks for messing around. Last time we started talking about this question, the problem of morals, but we talked about it from an unbelieving worldview, an unbelieving perspective. And now, today, I want us to review briefly what we had talked about last time. And then I also want to go into the problem of morals from a Christian worldview, where morality comes from and all of those things from a Christian worldview. Okay? So that's what we're going to be doing today. Last time, again, this is just review. If this is fresh to some of you, I completely understand, but this is review from last time. Last time, we had quoted Dostoevsky. Without God and the future life, everything is permitted. One can do anything. So I'm going to ask you guys now. We talked about this last time, but we have a lot of new people today. Without God in the future life, everything is permitted. One can do anything. First, I want to know, is this true? And second, is this what you have experienced? Okay? So do you think it's true that without God in the future life, everything is permitted, one can do anything? And is this what you have experienced? Have you experienced atheists or those who don't believe in God in the afterlife who are generally immoral people? Okay. So those are the two things I want to ask you guys. And again, we talked about this last time, but I think it can be helpful to go over again. While you guys answer that, I'm going to try my tea. Very nice. So again, without God in the afterlife, everything is permitted. One can do anything. This is from Dostoevsky. What do you guys think? Is he right? Is he wrong? Does it need some nuancing? How do you guys feel about that one? Yeah, I didn't say at the beginning, but for those who are new, I love interaction in the chat. I love you guys to type in the chat box while we're doing the study. Okay, Jesse has an idea. Very good. Looks very well thought out. Rafe has an idea. Rafe says, I was not sure what you had asked. Sorry, no problem. Dostoevsky here is quoted, without God in the future life, everything is permitted. One can do anything. Is this true, first off? And is it what you have experienced, secondly? So is this true just in the abstract, what Dostoevsky says? And if it's true, is this what you've experienced, that atheists generally live immorally? Shirley gives an answer. Okay, let's walk through these. Jesse says, logically, I think it's true. But in experience, atheists live inconsistently with this concept. It feels very nice to me. Pretty nuanced as well. Very, very good approach, I think. So I like the ideas that are present there. Rafe, I already said that. Liam says, I say like I did last time, the word needs defining and is ambiguous. I see. You feel like it's too ambiguous, it's not well defined enough. Rafe says, in the abstract, yes. In reality, no, because they borrow from the Christian worldview to give structure to their life. Very good, very similar to Jess. Shirley says, no, I don't think this is true. Right, and we kind of experience that as we interact with atheists in the real world, you know. We've, I think, all met people who don't necessarily believe in God and yet live morally. And I think we've also all met people who say they believe in God and live immorally. And so it's kind of like, what gives, you know? So we examined this quite a bit last time. And we made a distinction. And on this one, this is too small, so I'm going to swap real quick. Yeah, perfect. We made a distinction between how we act and why we act that way. If you make this distinction between how you act and why we act that way, then you can begin to answer this a little bit better. Jesse says, which tea? This is a ripe pu'er. I believe it's 2008. 2008 ripe pu'er cake. Very, very nice. Yields a very dark looking tea. Dark red. So, when you ask yourself how we act, oftentimes people act inconsistently with their worldview, just like Jesse and Rafe were saying. Look, how we act, sometimes people will act immorally or morally independent of what their espoused worldview is. Okay? So how we act is different than why we act that way. And why we act that way, that's getting to the heart of the apologetic question. Why are we acting this way? What is consistent within our worldview that allows us or directs us to act in this manner, okay? And so that's what we're making a distinction on here, okay? When it comes to Dostoevsky's claim, I think he's speaking more to why we act that way. He's trying to critique the worldview in general, but he's not speaking as much to how we act in general. And I think that distinction is important to make, okay? Keller says this, and this is review from last time. Keller says, anyone can say, I feel this is the right thing to do, and so that is how I will act. The moral source, in this case, is a feeling within. Can you see the difference between, he says, I feel this is the right thing to do, so this is how I will act. That's how we act. And then the second remark, the moral source in this case is a feeling within. That's why we act the way we do. Those two differences, okay? He says, however, on the secular view of reality, how can anyone ever say to anyone else, this is right or wrong for you to do, whether you feel it or not? You can never say that to someone unless there is a moral source outside them that they must honor, end quote. And so that's the distinction. He's trying to drill down why we act the way we do. From a secular worldview, the source of morality is within. Why we act the way we do is based on within, okay? Whereas from a Christian or a biblical worldview, the source of morality is outside of us. The source of morality is God, and so we must honor him. So there's a very big difference based upon where the source of your morality comes from. And again, we talked about this last time. Julian Baggini went a little bit further with this, said this, atheists are quite rightly keen to counter the accusation that life without God cannot be moral. That's how we act, okay? However, he goes on to admit that for the religious, at least there is some bedrock belief that gives a reason to believe that morality is real and will prevail. That's why we act the way we do. In an atheist universe, morality can be rejected without a clear, compelling reason to believe in reality, and that's exactly what will sometimes happen, end quote. Okay? That's exactly what will sometimes happen. So atheists who live consistently with their espoused worldview, the fact that there is no God, they get their morality, the source of their moral code, from within, and what that does is it makes it to where that morality is subjective rather than being objective. There's no bedrock foundation from which we derive it. Liam says, well, there are a number of standards for right and wrong other than it just being person relative for atheists. Shirley says, without the right source, your feelings or right or wrong will change due to circumstances. Right, and it's going to be person to person. It's going to vary. Okay, so then we asked this last time. What solutions does secularism have? Secularism essentially has two solutions to the problem. Does anyone remember what either solution was? And again, I apologize if I'm going a bit fast, but this is just review from last time's study. If you're interested, you can access all of these on our YouTube. What solutions are available to secularism in order to solve this quandary of the moral source being within and therefore being subjective rather than objective? Any thoughts on that one? Yep, the Custer's got it. Moral relativism and morals are brute facts. Jesse says, can't remember. No problem. The Custer's remembered for us. The first one was moral relativism, okay? If you're saying the source of morality comes from within, it's subjective based upon the person. It's not imposed on us from an external source, but instead it's just subjectively based upon each individual person. Then you can have a solution to this that's called moral relativism. This says, you know what? I'm going to embrace that, and I'm just going to say morality is relative. It's based upon each person. So, the quote here, the first approach is to insist that moral obligation simply does not exist, and that despite the reluctance of most people to face this, there really is no right or wrong, good or evil. Okay? That's the first solution. There is no right or wrong. There is no good or evil. It's just relative to the individual. Okay? So that's the first solution that secularism and unbelieving worldviews can run to. Okay? Moral relativism. The second one, the Custer's also brought up, morals are brute facts. They are out there and they are real, but they're brute facts. And what that means is they're like a tree. As real as a tree is, you go up to a tree and you put your hands on it. It's real, it's there. So too, somebody can say that morality is there and we can discern it, but it's not derived from a greater or higher power. It's just there and given to us. Okay? And that's one of the ones we talked about. Now, I don't know if you guys remember the critique of this one, but we essentially spent a lot of time talking about the moral ought and where that moral ought comes from. A moral ought, even if it's a brute fact out in the universe, okay, that morals are there and they exist, whether or not you ought to obey them is dependent upon personal relationship. Okay, and I know I'm just stating that and throwing that out there, but we kind of walked through it last time and tried to prove it out, okay? But it's based on a personal relationship. You can't have a moral ought unless you have somebody that you are obligated to, okay? Unless you're obligated to somebody, then even if morality is a brute fact out in the universe that this is good and this is evil, you still can't say you ought to do good and you ought not to do evil. Why? Because if you're saying somebody is obligated to live a certain way, then they are obligated to someone else, so a person who is imposing that obligation upon them. So this will go back to something that Liam said earlier. Well, there are other moral options besides relativism. Yes, it's to call morality brute facts out in the universe. So you have Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, okay? And you have several other perspectives on where duty and moral oughts come from. But ultimately, they all end up failing because they deny a personal God who can impose them upon us. If there is, let's pretend Kant's categorical imperative is the right way. And I realize that some may not know what Kant's categorical imperative is, okay? But for those who do, let's assume that it's out there. Who's to say that you ought to submit to the categorical imperative? There must be a power that requires you to do it. There's a whom that you have to answer to. Even if somebody is willing to admit, look, all right, I'll admit there are brute facts out there. Some things are good and some things are evil. What's to stop someone from selecting the evil for themselves, besides they don't like the terminology? Nothing, because they're not answering to somebody. It's just an objective fact out there in the universe. Fine, I can be evil then. It doesn't matter, okay? So even if morals are brute facts, there's no one to impose them upon us unless you have God. So that's a big, important distinction there, okay? So that's review from last time. So today we're going to talk about the problem of morals, but we're going to talk about it from the opposite perspective. What was everything that we just reviewed? That was a critique of secular views of morality, okay? We were critiquing secular views of morality. What I want us to do now is to give a positive case for Christian morality. So what we just reviewed was essentially offense. If you're playing football and you have the ball, it's on your side of the field and your offense is on the field, you're trying to score points. That's what we did last time, and that's what we just did in review. But you've also got to play defense. Offense is only half the game. And so today we're going to play defense. Today we're going to make a positive Christian case for morality. We've critiqued secular views of morality, but today we want to make a positive Christian case for morality, okay? So here's the simplest argument for morality, okay? This is the simplest Christian argument for morality. And there are two premises, and a conclusion. Premise number one, if there are objectively binding moral obligations, then God exists. Premise 2, there are objectively binding moral obligations. Conclusion, therefore, God exists. Now, there are a lot of different forms of the Christian argument for the existence of God from morality. There are a lot of different forms, but this is the simplest one. If there are objectively binding moral obligations, then God exists. There are objectively binding moral obligations, therefore, God exists. Liam says real football or American football? I meant American football, but I'm sure in soccer you can also have offense and defense. So, what I want to throw out there is, how would you refute this? Okay? We've got a threefold argument, 2 premises, and a conclusion. Now, typically, when you refute a logical syllogism, you take issue with one of the premises. You say, your assumptions in this premise aren't right. So, premise 1 or premise 2 probably need refutation. But I just want to hear from you guys. What do you think of this argument? This is a very simplistic form of a moral argument for the existence of God. What do you think of this argument? What sorts of holes would you poke in it? How would you refute it? Okay? What do you guys think? If there are objectively binding moral obligations, then God exists. There are objectively binding moral obligations, therefore, God exists. What do you guys think? And while you are doing that, I'm going to pour more tea. Cool Blaze is here. Cool Blaze is jumping right into logic class. Cool Blaze is using all the right proper language. Jesse asks, how do you prove something is objective? That kind of goes back to last week's study, where we tried to demonstrate that without God, you can't have objective morality, i.e. morality that exists outside of ourselves. Objectivity is something that is not contingent upon us, not contingent upon yourself. And we spent all of last week trying to prove or demonstrate or argue that secularists can have morality, but ultimately it's either subjective or there's nobody to impose it upon us. But it's a good question, Jesse. Cool Blaze says, try to disprove the premises. Exactly. That's how you refute a logical syllogism. Liam says, premise 1 is weak. What about Kant's moral imperative? Okay, good. Shirley says, this would not prove the existence of God. Could you go into more detail, Shirley, why you think it would not prove the existence of God? And again, I'm just trying to gather kind of ideas and thoughts on this one. What do you guys think of the syllogism? How would you refute it? Which premise do you think are weak? So I appreciate all your guys' insight thus far. Liam says, God has many attributes. This argument doesn't talk of them. I see. So because this does not necessarily prove the Christian God, the God of the Bible, then you don't like the argument as much. Kublai says, Kant's categorical imperative just provided a test to see which actions were moral. I see, Kublai. So what you're saying is that Kant's categorical imperative doesn't necessarily answer or refute either of the premises. Okay, good. I appreciate the interaction, guys. I appreciate you spending some time with the ideas. Kublai says, right. Okay, perfect. So, I think if you look at trying to refute each premise, before I go into that, Jesse says, I think for many, what we deem objective binding standards are actually believed to be societal norms based upon cultural development and identity, not necessarily objective, but created by groups of individuals. Yeah, very good. Very good. And I think that's getting at this. If you try to refute premise 1, you end up in an area that we've already discussed. And if you try to refute premise 2, you likewise end up in an area we've already discussed. What areas are those? Well, if you deny the first premise, you are essentially saying that morals are brute facts. Okay? This is actually going to what Liam was saying. Premise 1 is weak, says Liam. What about Kant's categorical imperative? Exactly. If you deny premise 1, you are trying to say that morals are brute facts out there in the universe to be discovered. Okay? If you deny premise 2, guess what you get? You get moral relativism. There are objectively binding moral obligations. You get rid of that premise. Now you're just saying they're subjective, just like moral relativism. So we've kind of backed into this argument because we spent all of last time talking about brute facts, morality is brute facts, and morality is moral relativism. We tried our best to refute each of those. Once you've refuted each of those, you've essentially established your first two premises, okay? So that's kind of how we built this syllogism. We built it backwards. We first refuted the denials of each of these premises, and then we established those premises as our two premises, and then we got our conclusion, coming up with a sound argument, as Cool Blaze put it. So that's really important to recognize. If you deny either one of these premises, you end up in a category that we've already tried to refute. Whether or not somebody found those compelling, that's another matter. But we've already addressed those ideas. We've already addressed moral relativism, and we've already addressed morality as brute facts. So either of those refutations have already somewhat been dealt with, okay? That said, this argument, this syllogism, is not airtight. Okay, and I want to throw that out there. We've already seen the basic denials, like I said here, but it's not airtight. Each of these had their problems, brute facts and moral relativism, but they were viable solutions, but they still had their problems associated with them. Now, I want you to see that this is essentially what we're getting at with this, okay? And this isn't nearly as compelling as a nice logical syllogism, okay? But it is something to know, okay? The argument for the existence of God from morality is a strong argument, but it's grounded kind of in this idea ultimately. We tried to work through the syllogism, we tried to formulate a logical approach, but really this is what you're trying to drive at when you are using the moral argument to try and promote the existence of God and Christianity, the truth of Christianity. This is essentially what you're doing. Keller says this: why would we unavoidably sense not only the reality of an objective good and evil, but also an abiding, overarching personal obligation to do one and turn from the other when there is no person to whom we are responsible? Do you see where Keller's argument hangs? Do you see what he's ultimately driving at by using the syllogism? He's driving at somebody's subjective experience or sense of morality. Why would we unavoidably sense the reality of an objective good and evil? Keller's argument relies upon your unavoidable sense. Okay? Now, that doesn't necessarily make it wrong, but we need to be clear that when we're using the moral argument to speak with skeptics, unbelievers, and secularists, we are appealing to the conscience. Jesse says that's some real Roman stuff right there. Exactly. We're appealing to the conscience. We unavoidably sense, we're saying, the reality of an objective good and evil. You see what I mean? That doesn't make it bad, wrong, or anything like that, but realize you're appealing to somebody's conscience when you're using the moral argument for the existence of God. And when you appeal to some people's conscience, for some it's going to be more compelling than for others, okay? Like, for example, and I hope you don't mind if I pick on you a little bit, Liam, but Liam thinks very logically through things, right? Liam is very logical, and he has a very organized thought process. So using an argument that appeals to the emotions or the feelings or something like that is unlikely to be super effective with Liam, so far as I can tell. This is only from what I know about you, Liam. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but Liam really thinks very logically and is able to walk through arguments in a step-by-step fashion. And so trying to appeal to the inner man, trying to appeal to the conscience, trying to appeal to feelings and emotions that you sense right and wrong, I think with Liam is unlikely to be as effective. Now, I'm not saying you don't have a conscience, Liam, or anything like that. Of course you do. But for somebody who does a lot of argumentation in the mind, maybe the moral argument for the existence of God won't be as an effective a strategy. Okay? So I just want to throw that out there. You've got a lot of tools in your toolbox, hopefully, by the time we're done with this apologetic study, and you want to select the right tool for the job. You want to use the right strategy depending on who you're talking to. But for other people, trying to appeal to their inward sense, that might be very effective, okay? That might be very effective. So you just have to discern who you're talking to, okay? But realize that's where the foundation of the argument is. It's your unavoidable sense. It's Romans 1. It's the conscience. That's what you're appealing to with this. Thanks for being willing to go along with that, Liam. I hope I didn't offend you at all. Okay, so here's what I want you to see. This is kind of the thought process that you're going with when you're using the moral argument for the existence of God. You kind of have a two-step process that you're trying to accomplish. First, the goal is to get the unbeliever to see that in their heads, their denial of God requires them to abandon objective morality in some way, shape, or form. Either they have to abandon objective morality in the sense that they have to turn to relativism, or they have to abandon objective reality in the sense that there's no one to impose the moral obligation of that morality. So that's your first goal. Get them to see that with their worldview, because they deny God, they lose objective morality in one way or another. The second step is now, at the same time, to tell them that in their hearts and in their lives, they live as though objective morality absolutely exists. You see what we're trying to do? You're trying to get them to see you can't have objective morality from within your worldview, and yet you know objective morality exists in your heart and in your life because you live that way and you feel that way, okay? This is why it gets to be a bit subjective, but this can be powerful because all of us have a conscience. You're actually leveraging every person's conscience when you try to argue this way. You're leveraging their own conscience against them. Okay, that's the idea here. So you're trying to do this twofold process. Now, as we drill down on this, Keller, channeling philosopher George Mavrodes, says this. Let me just hide my head again. There we go. Keller, channeling George Mavrodes, says this. He outlines three kinds of universes. Okay, this is step one of the two-step process. He outlines three kinds of universes. You have the secular universe, okay? You have the Platonic universe, in which there is a supernatural realm of ideas, and you have the traditional universe with a morally good creator God. Okay? Then he asks, in which kind of world would we expect moral facts or obligations? The answer is that the secular universe would not lead us to expect them, while the Platonic or the Christian world would. This goes back to something that was mentioned earlier. I think Liam mentioned it earlier when he said that there are other options besides that. This argument doesn't necessarily prove the Christian God. And he's right. He's right. It doesn't necessarily prove the Christian God. You can see here, even George Mavrodes grants that if we identify objective morality out there in the universe, it could even prove a Platonic universe exists. not even necessarily a God, but a universe that Plato posited, where there's this abstract realm of ideas out there that are somehow instantiated into our world. Liam says, can't find a good emote, but you didn't offend me in the least. Okay, very good, Liam. Thank you. Thank you for being understanding, brother. So, we maybe proved too little, but here's what he's getting at. At least this demonstrates that secularism is beginning to fall apart. You see what he's getting at? Like, okay, fine, maybe we don't prove the Christian God. Maybe we don't even necessarily prove a God, but we do begin to start proving that secularism, no God, atheism entirely, is likely lacking at this point. Okay, that's what George Mavrodes says here. He continues. I'm going to have to hide my head again. I don't even know why I brought it back. Mavrodes continues. Now, in theoretical physics, if you hold a theory and you observe a new phenomenon that your theory would not lead you to expect, you don't say, I don't care about the fact, I'm going to hold tight to my theory. No, you at least open your mind to the possibility that your theory is wrong and another theory is more true to reality. Mavrodes concludes that the secular thinkers should admit that if they believe in moral facts and obligation, these make much more sense in a world with God and a transcendent realm than in one without them. Okay? I'm hoping you guys can understand his argument here. This is a very, very important apologetic principle. Okay. Sorry, I had to pour another cup of tea. This is a very, very important apologetic principle, guys. When we are arguing for the existence of God, oftentimes the most effective ways to argue for God's existence is to do so at an angle. Not to do so directly, but to do so obliquely, if that makes sense. Notice how this argument flows, guys. Notice how this argument flows. It essentially says this. Here are three hypotheses of what the universe could be like. The universe could be atheistic, completely secular, no God at all. The universe could be Christian, or let's just posit a God, or the universe could be Platonic. That Plato's idea of a transcendent realm is essentially where things come from. Okay, so here are three hypotheses that are possible theories for how the universe actually exists. Now let's go look at the evidence, says Mavrodes. Mavrodes says we look at the evidence and we see a universe or a world where there are moral facts and moral obligation. We see a universe where there is moral objectivity. And then, says Mavrodes, okay, if you are coming at this scientifically, if you are actually thinking about this in a consistent fashion, you've got your three hypotheses for the way the universe actually is, and you're looking at the evidence, and one worldview posits a universe where there are no moral absolutes, there are no moral objective facts and obligation, and yet we go out in the universe and we find moral objective facts and obligation. You don't just throw your fact aside and say, well, that doesn't line up with my theory. That doesn't line up well with my hypothesis. Therefore, let's just throw those facts out. No, the good scientist, somebody who's pursuing the scientific method in an appropriate manner, takes all the facts in and then determines which of the hypotheses is most in line with the facts. Okay? And that's Mavrodes' argument here. That's what he's essentially getting at. I want to read this again. Hello, Aflin. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Listen to Mavrodes' argument. Mavrodes outlines or posits three kinds of universes. A secular one, a Platonic one, and one in which there's a supernatural realm of ideas, that's the Platonic, and the traditional universe with a morally good creator God. Then he asks, in which kind of world would we expect moral facts and obligations? The answer is that the secular universe would not lead us to expect them, while the Platonic or the Christian universe would. He continues. Now, in theoretical physics, if you hold a theory and you observe a new phenomenon that your theory would not lead you to expect, you don't say, I don't care about the fact, I'm going to hold tight to my theory. No, you at least open your mind to the possibility that your theory is wrong and another theory is more true to reality. Mavrodes concludes that the secular thinkers should admit that if they believe in moral facts and obligation, these make much more sense in a world without God, a world with God and a transcendent realm than in a world without them. Okay? So again, I want you guys to see how we are arguing here. We are arguing obliquely. We're arguing from an angle. You're not addressing it directly, but instead you're saying, kind of like the scientific method, okay, here are 3 theories for how the universe could be. Let's look at the universe now around us. Which theory makes the most sense of the facts that we find? So, the goal in your conversation with the secularist is to demonstrate that objective morality exists, because if you can demonstrate to them that objective morality exists, then you proceed to demonstrate to them that secularism fails to account for objective reality. And if they want to be, not objective reality, objective morality. And if they want to be consistent and adhere to objective morality, then they ought to give up their secularism. Now, you haven't proven to them that Christianity is true, but at least something more like a Platonic worldview or something more like a worldview with a God is much more likely to be true. And again, it's a scientific way of doing the analysis. Shirley says, so would you ask someone why they hold to some morals if there is no belief in God as to the reason for trying to live morally? Here's how I think you ought to go about this, guys. And I'm so glad you asked the question, Shirley. So I am just going to try to give an example, okay? Let's say you have a friend and they're a secularist. They're an atheist, okay? They say they don't believe in God and that morality is merely relative to the individual, okay? But you're talking to them about world events and you get on the subject, maybe back in the day, you get on the subject of, say, Vietnam, okay? And they are indignant, very, very upset about what we're doing in Vietnam. I can't believe we would just go over there and do that, blah, 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 blah. And you could pick anything. For more modern listeners, maybe they pick the subject of the coronavirus stuff and being forced to wear masks, right? They might be passionate about that. Or you could pick some of the race stuff up that's going on right now, anything like that. And they're expressing moral indignation towards what's going on right now in society. You want to gently try to point out the incongruence there. Now, hold on a second. We've talked a few times about this. You said you said you don't believe in God and you think morality is relative to the individual? Oh, yes, absolutely. But you're indignant at what is going on here in society. Oh, yeah, this is very, very wrong. Can you not see the incongruence there? That you, on the one hand, say morality is relative, but on the other hand, you are expressing moral outrage at something. And don't get me wrong, rightfully so. I think that's outrageous as well. But why the moral outrage if morality is merely relative? Well, you know what I mean. I'm just very upset with this, right? No. The way you were treating it, you made it sound like this isn't just your opinion. That you made it sound like you were treating the subject as though this is objectively wrong. You were angry and indignant and upset, and you were treating it as though it is objectively wrong. Aflin says moral outrage is expressing his disagreement. See, I think, Aflin, that when we're expressing moral outrage, we're doing something much different than it's my opinion that I don't like this. All the secularist can do when it comes to morality, this is the only difference, Athlon, literally. If you have a secular worldview, when it comes to moral opinions or ideas, we are literally talking about the difference between chocolate and vanilla. Do you prefer chocolate or do you prefer vanilla? When somebody, no, you don't see anybody going into any moral outrage about how chocolate is better than vanilla. Nobody does that, okay? You just say, I prefer chocolate, somebody else prefers vanilla, that's fine. But if morality is established the way the secular worldview thinks of it, then it is merely subjective opinion, and it is not objective fact out there in the universe. It is exactly identical to the difference between chocolate and vanilla. I don't like what they're doing in Vietnam. I don't like what the government's making us do right now, or I can't believe that my neighbor won't. Pick your flavor, okay? Do you hate that your neighbor won't wear a mask, or do you hate that the government's making you wear a mask? I don't care. Pick your flavor. You talk about it like it's something a lot more than just your preference. You talk about it like it's more than just chocolate versus vanilla. Athlon says, it's not objective indeed. Getting sick because people spread it is. Yeah, I was just using an example, Athlon. I mean the outrage at the issue. If morality is subjective, then spreading the virus or not spreading the virus is a morally neutral matter. It doesn't matter. You have no objective standard to which to appeal. And yet when people express moral outrage, they are digging deeper. They're digging their heels in a lot more than just their preference of flavor in terms of ice cream. It's more than chocolate versus vanilla. We've already spent, 1.5 studies trying to demonstrate that secular morality boils down to chocolate versus vanilla. But people don't act like that's what we're talking about. Athlon says, a person can have their opinion and have all their rights to express it. Of course. But where does the level of intensity ratchet up? To me, that's demonstrative of the fact that we recognize and feel that this moral stance is much more than just a subjective opinion. So, that's all I'm getting at. And I was originally brought this up, Shirley, because that's how I think you ought to engage on the topic with somebody. Point out the incongruence with how they act in their life. They live their life as though morality is an objective fact. But then they say with their mouth that morality is subjective opinion. You can't have your cake and eat it too. That's the idea, Shirley. So try to talk to them and ask them questions to get them to see, to demonstrate to them that they're living one way while saying another thing. And they're only saying that other thing because they recognize that they're forced into that position philosophically. But they don't actually live their life that way. And here's my point. If you say that your belief is one thing, but you have to live your life the other way, that is demonstrative of the fact that your belief is wrong. That's exactly what George Mavrodes is getting at here. You say you posit a universe in which there is no God, and yet you live in that universe as though there are objective facts and objective morality, demonstrating the fact that your belief in the fact that there is no God is not sustainable in your real life. Okay? In theoretical physics, if you hold a theory and observe a new phenomenon that your theory would not lead you to expect, you don't say, I don't care about that fact. I'm going to hold tight to my theory. No, you at least open your mind to the possibility that your theory is wrong and another theory is more true to reality. Okay? So you either have to lose your moral indignation because that's a demonstration of an objective view of morality, or lose your secular worldview because it can't sustain or support the world in which you live. Shirley says, so as a believer in God, we are told not to subject others to our belief. But when they react to something that is happening, they are then saying that I should see it the same way as them. Correct. We all have certain beliefs, and we're imposing them upon the world around us, and we expect others to read the world around us the same way. Or maybe not the same way, but we expect others to read the world around them according to their worldviews. Aflin says, a person can be raged at anything enough to go grab his shotgun and go full out. And here's my simple question, Aflin. Is he acting in accordance with his espoused worldview or not? You see what I mean? If your worldview doesn't allow you to live life consistently, then your worldview is wrong. If you can't live in alignment with your worldview, then your worldview is wrong. So if you have a worldview that says that morality is merely subjective opinion, and it's just the difference between flavors of ice cream, then it doesn't make any sense for you to go full rage mode against anything morally existing in the universe, because it's just subjective. You have your opinion, somebody else has theirs. Ryan is here. Cherry Garcia, challenge me. I find that most people go through life without giving an inch of thought to their own morality. Tanner, what do you do with the secularist who attributes morality to evolution? We have a group morality for survival purposes. Very good question, Ryan. I believe that morality can't be binding. I believe that, okay, fine, morality evolved so that we can function in society. But then it's not an objective morality that you ought to live by, and that somebody can impose a moral ought upon you. All it is functional. It's functional for society to work well. Even if you want to say survival of the fittest, okay? If morality evolved, what did it evolve to do? It didn't evolve to tell us what is right and what is wrong. It evolved to tell us what works, okay? There is a massive difference between what works and what is right or what is wrong. Just because something works doesn't mean there is any moral obligation to submit to it. So you end up with a morality that is functional, but not actually true or right or objective in any way, shape, or form. Which means that you as an individual have no obligation to it. You see what I'm getting at, Ryan? Somebody tries to say, we evolved this morality this way. Fine. I'm going against evolution. I don't care. Evolution can't impose any moral ought upon you. Okay? And then if somebody says, well, we're going to arrest you or kill you or whatever for you living outside of the moral norms of our society, fine, but it doesn't make it objectively bad, evil, or wrong. You see what I'm saying? It's just purely functional. So if morality evolved, it's just functional morality. It's not actually, in any objective sense, right or wrong, good or evil. Those are just ways we refer to it, again, much like the difference between chocolate, vanilla, and Cherry Garcia. Just like Aflin says, it's purely functional, precisely. And if it's purely functional, then there's no objectivity to it. You live the way you want, I'll live the way I want. I like Cherry Garcia, you like chocolate. That's it. So that's how I would address it, Ryan. Great question, but I feel like it falls into the exact same pitfalls. Very, very good question. Let's continue. So this is Keller continuing to channel George Mavrodes. Says this: they should consider that their theory of the world cannot account for one of the most indelible and central aspects of human life, morality, and therefore they should be open to the possibility that another theory of the world is more true to reality. Okay? They should consider their theory of the world cannot account for one of the most indelible and central aspects of human life, morality, and therefore they should be open to the possibility that another theory of the world is more true to reality. Again, what's the point here? The point here is that we recognize objective morality. If somebody doesn't want to say it with their mouth, they live it with their lives. Everybody recognizes objective morality. Everybody lives according to objective morality. Even Aflin says there is no objectivity except for math and in some proximity physics. But Aflin, I guarantee, lives his life as though morality is objective. You can't escape it. We live in God's world. Rather than living inconsistently with your espoused worldview. I think you should instead submit to the idea that maybe my worldview is wrong because it's inconsistent with reality. Ryan says, yep, totally, thanks. My pleasure. My pleasure, Ryan. So that is what Keller is driving at with his argument here. And here's his one of his primary points on the matter. This is Keller just giving his personal experience, okay, guys? He says, over the years, it has probably been at this very point that many of my secular friends and conversation partners have felt some unease with their own point of view. Most of the skeptics whom I have seen move towards faith later told me that it was around this issue of moral obligation that they first began to wonder whether their views really fit the world they actually live in. Okay, guys, so this can be a very powerful tool, a very powerful argument for not necessarily the existence of the Christian God, but at least for the improbability that the universe is based in secularism or atheism. Okay? And this gets at a final comment from A.N. Wilson. Okay. A.N. Wilson says this. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but A.N. Wilson previously had abandoned Christianity and left it and said we should try to live our lives without it. And then later on in life, he returned to Christianity because he said that atheism and secularism could not account for the world in which he lived. It couldn't account for the world in which he existed. Okay. This is A.N. Wilson's final statement on the matter, and I think it's a beautiful way to sum it up. This isn't like a compelling argument or anything like that. We've already walked through those from Rhodes, but A.N. Wilson, I think, kind of beautifully summarizes the ideas at least. Wilson says this: the gospel would still be true even if no one believed it. The hopeful thing is that where it is tried, where it is imperfectly and hesitantly followed, as it was in the Northern Ireland and in South Africa during the peace processes, as it is in many a Salvation Army hostel this Christmas, as it flickers in countless unseen Christian lives, it works. And its palpable and remarkable power to transform human life takes us to the position of believing that something very wonderful indeed began with the birth of Christ into the world. You see what A.N. Wilson's getting at here? He does it in flowery language, but he essentially says this: wherever the gospel is tried, wherever Christianity is attempted, it works. It actually works with people's lives. And that's kind of the whole point. Secularism doesn't work, guys. Secularism doesn't work. You can't live consistently with it. You either abandon objective morality or you abandon your secularism. But where Christianity is tried, it works. It's consistent with the world in which we live. It actually functions well for the building up of a good and proper society. I'm not saying secularists can't be moral. Of course they can. But whenever they are acting inconsistently with their espoused worldview. They're not actually acting in congruence with what they say they believe. They say they believe morality is all relative and it's up to the individual, and yet they are outraged at murder, at rape, at government overreach, at their neighbor who won't follow the rules, etc. Demonstrating the fact that they, in their heart, believe that morality is objective, but with their lips, they say it's subjective. It doesn't work. Secularism doesn't work. Atheism doesn't work because you can't live consistently with it. If you have to live inconsistently with your worldview, using the scientific method, it should demonstrate to you that your worldview has flaws and faults, and you should look for a new one. Okay? And so that's the final thing I wanted to point out here. When you look at the real world, when we seek to apply our belief system to the actual world in which we live, Christianity works. It's functional. It actually does what it's needed to do. And secularism doesn't. And so that's what you're trying to do when you use the moral argument for the existence of God. Okay? All right, guys, I think that's all I had. Yeah, that's it. So I'm going to be, I see a lot of chat has been going on. I'm going to try and walk through chat and get some ideas. I would like you guys now to type your comments in the chat. So if you have any final questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and throw them in there. And then we will close with prayer. So I'm going to close with prayer right now, and then I'm going to try to walk through chat and do a little bit of Q&A afterwards for 5 to 10 minutes, okay? So go ahead and type your comments down there while I pray. Father God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your graciousness and your mercy. And I pray, God, that you would open up our eyes to see your truth, that you would open up our eyes to see exactly who you are and what you have done and how we ought to live in the universe that you have put us in, Lord God. I thank you for your graciousness and mercy. And I thank you for all you have done for us, Lord God. Please draw us closer to you. Please grow us and strengthen us. Guide us. Help us to glorify and honor you. And please be with us this evening and the rest of this weekend. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Jesse says, thanks for the study. My pleasure, Jesse. Stone Dial was here with the thumbs up. Thank you, Stone Dial. Hope you enjoyed. Liam says, amen. Thank you for praying, Liam. Okay, let's walk through. I know Afflin and Cool Blaze have been going kind of back and forth. Liam says, the atheist might make the argument of the problem of evil. How can a good God that is all-powerful live in a universe that has so much evil? A God unable to prevent evil? I think I'm missing some of the argument. Yeah, we've talked about that before separately, Liam. But it's a different argument than the morality argument. But it's a good point. It's a good point, and it also needs to be discussed. Ryan Stoffer says, I would insert true Christianity there. Unfortunately, failed Christian communities are out there. That's correct. That's correct. But here's my point, Ryan. When a Christian lives more immorally, they are living inconsistently with their worldview. If a Christian lives immorally, they're living inconsistently with their worldview. Whereas if an atheist lives immorally, they are not living inconsistently with their worldview because morality is relativistic. Kublai says, I think there is an ought fallacy here. The question is, why should or shouldn't one act the way they do? Not people act the way they do. Exactly. We're talking about why. I mentioned that at the very, very beginning, Cool Blaze. You're exactly right. We're talking about why people act the way they do. And atheism can't account for the way they act. They're moral people because they have a conscience. Everyone has a conscience. But Christianity can account for the conscience that is a moral ought, and atheism can't account for a conscience that isn't anything more than, well, evolutionarily, it was beneficial for people to live in alignment with this. Therefore, for the sake of evolution in the human race, you should live in alignment to it. And my simple answer to that is evolution can't impose an ought upon me. Just like you said, Cool Blaze. There's an ought issue here. Precisely right. Afflin says, is there a way people are meant to live? No. Is it objectively wrong to do according to your views? No. How other people see it, right/wrong, is irrelevant. So I understand you can say that intellectually, Afflin. I don't think you can live it with your life. Should a person rape? No, you're not allowed to say that. You just contradicted it. Why? Because there is a high chance for that same person regret it, even if unpunished by society. Your high chance of them to regret it is based on your perspective on it. They might have a high chance of enjoying it and enjoying it thoroughly. Shirley says, the footnote in Keller's book quoted from Thomas Nagel's Mind and Cosmos. Too long for quote, but it is a good comment. You're 100% right, Shirley. I actually really liked that quote. I read that footnote as well. And you know what? I'm going to bring that up on the screen. And we'll kind of wrap up with this one. I think you're 100% right with this, Shirley. So let's do this. And let's see if I can't zoom in. Here's the footnote, guys. Let me scroll down. I'm so glad you noted that, Shirley, because I agree. I thought it was a great, great footnote. Make this bigger. Here's what Keller says, quoting Thomas Nagel. I think testimony to what Rhodes and Evans are saying can be found in Thomas Nagel's Mind and Cosmos, which has the subtitle, Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian Conception of Nature is Almost Certainly False. Nagel agrees that moral value really exists. While continuing to assert his atheism, he concludes that the reductionistic view of the world, so dominant now that life consists of nothing more than physical, chemical, and biological substances, cannot account for human consciousness, the validity of reason, or moral value. He admirably and honestly admits he does not have good answers to these many questions that this raises. But he concludes that because of moral reality, there must be something more to the universe than we can see now. He denies the current naturalistic and Bertrand-Russellian view of the world. See Thomas Nagel, Mind and Cosmos, Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian Conception of Nature is Almost Certainly False. Boom. Thank you, Shirley, for bringing that up. It's a fantastic quote, and I agree 100% with that one. I agree 100%. And that's just it. The Neo-Darwinian purely materialistic view of the universe fails. It falls on its face. I hate to say it. I love you, Aflin. You do such a good job. You hang out here so much, and I really appreciate it. But should a person rape? No. Why? Because they might regret it is extremely weak, my friend. That's extremely weak. And that's what you're forced into because you recognize you cannot assert that morality is objective. And I love you, Aflin. I really do. You participate so much, and I really appreciate it. But you do recognize that morality can't be objective. And so you're forced into extremely weak arguments like somebody shouldn't rape because they're going to regret it maybe. Look how weak that is. You don't believe that, Aflin? You don't believe that? That the only reason somebody shouldn't rape is because they might regret it? Okay, Aflin put more. He says, you pick on words, let me rephrase. Why would I not kill? Because I understand that while it might be top solution on my mind, I know it will change and I'll be happy to not give in to the moment. It's weak. That's weak. That's what happens when you have a purely subjective morality. First, you said you might end up regretting it. Why would I not kill? Because I understand that while it might be top solution on my mind right now, I know it will change and I'll be happy to not give in to the moment. That's just the same thing as saying you're going to regret it. It's the same thing. Subjective morality like that is extremely weak. And you know I love you, brother. You know I do. You know I do. All I would challenge you with, Aflin, is that if your understanding of morality can't line up with the world in which you live, then maybe the worldview that you're holding to isn't the right one, isn't the true one. I don't see its weakness. The idea that you might change your mind in the future, that's the only thing holding you back from murdering somebody? In the moment, I might be angry, but what about premeditated murder? What about all these? They're doing something wrong. You know they're doing something wrong. You know it's not just up to them. It's not just their opinion. You know they're doing something wrong. But you know you can't say that because morality has to be relativistic for an atheist. And so you're trying to dance around and, you know, who do we just have? The Golden State Killer just got caught. The Golden State Killer just got caught. Okay? He premeditated murder, loves going around killing women all over the place. You know he did something objectively wrong. You know he did. But you know you can't say it because your worldview doesn't account for it. And so all I would say is your conscience is right here. Your conscience that says it is evil and immoral and wrong to kill somebody is correct. And what does that mean then? That your philosophical worldview is wrong. Select a philosophical worldview that actually lines up with what you know to be true. See, exactly, Cool Blaze. Aflin says everyone has things to regret. Cool Blaze says, so regret is what grounds the rightness or wrongness of morality? It's just about regret? No. That's why I'm saying it's weak. It's extremely weak. Shirley says he is saying there is something about having a conscience. If so, where does that conscience come from? Precisely. Liam says some people don't regret the wrong they do. Exactly. And that's what I mean with a serial killer or a serial rapist. They love it. They never regret it. It's not good because they never regret it. Then it's right for them. That's my point, Aflin. That's my point. It's right for them. That's what you're forced to boil down to. And you know that's not true. You know it is not true for somebody to murder and to rape. You know it's not. You know that's not right. But you know philosophically you're forced to say that it is right for them. Aflin says, I'd recommend watching interviews with them. We have. Jess and I have watched interviews with them. They're broken. They love it, and it is right for them according to relativism, but it's objectively morally evil and wrong. It absolutely is, and you know that it is. Anyway, I really enjoyed this conversation. Aflin, I commend you on coming into a Bible study where you know people disagree with you and voicing your opinions and discussing it. So I really appreciate that. You are very courageous, Aflin. Very, very courageous. And you're very thoughtful, and I appreciate all of this stuff. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. But I am going to take off now, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out this evening. So that was morality. We talked about it in 2 sections. Next time, we're going to go on to justice. Okay? Justice. Chapter 10. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Good stream. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, guys. It's only a good stream because of your guys' interaction. Fantastic interaction tonight. Thank you so much. I love you, Aflin. I really do. Gently challenging is appropriate, I think. Thanks for the stream. See you, chat. Yeah, awesome. And thanks for being a great sport about all this, Aflin. And again, I commend you on your courage to come in here and do this. Okay. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Take care. God bless. Bye now.